It all started on a quiet morning. I had just finished my coffee and sat down in my backyard to take a breather and enjoy the sunshine that had finally appeared after a week of rain. My bench? A craft I made with my own hands during the pandemic, when I thought becoming a cabinet maker was my new spiritual calling. It took me days to get it right. I sanded every bit of it and applied an imported varnish that cost an arm and a leg. It was the kind of piece of furniture that not only served as a place to sit, but also had a history and a soul. Or it did. Then it appeared. She appeared out of nowhere, as if she had a radar for the smell of fresh coffee. Without warning, without manners, she came through my half-unlocked gate. My fault, I admit, and started talking loudly, complaining about the price of almond milk in the supermarket and how the city was full of classless people. Classic. I kept quiet and smiled. There was no point in arguing. I just wanted to finish my coffee. But fate had other plans. Or rather, she did. "What a beautiful bench," she said, with that twinkle in her eye that you recognize when she's about to do something stupid and still thinks she's doing you a favor. Before I could say, "It's not designed to hold so much emotional weight," she was already turning and lowering the tons of meat, swinging like a pendulum about to collide with the floor. It was all in slow motion. The crack of splitting wood sounded like a symphony of domestic apocalypse. The seat sank first, then one of the legs gave way like an old knee in a soccer match, and finally, the crack. That noise that traumatizes anyone who has ever tried to assemble an IKEA piece of furniture without a manual. And she laughed. She laughed as if she'd just let out a bang in an elevator and was proud of it. As if destroying my bench was a social event and not a tragedy foretold. She said something about furniture being too fragile these days, and, amazingly, suggested that I make a more inclusive bench. Inclusive. As if I were a chair manufacturer with an accessibility policy and not just a guy trying to drink coffee in his own backyard. My brain froze for a few seconds. The coffee was already cold. My soul was even colder. And there she was, amidst the rubble of my handiwork, fumbling with the lid of the sugar bowl that wasn't even hers. No apologies. No, "Let me know if you want me to pay for another one." Nothing. Just her way of existing as if the world revolved around her presence. And the most incredible thing, she really believed it. As she got up, with some difficulty and a noise that sounded like a sofa being dragged, I could only observe the trail of splintered wood that remained. It was almost poetic, if it wasn't tragic, like the Titanic sinking with an Orocha soundtrack in the background. She left my yard as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just destroyed the only piece of furniture I was proud to say I'd made with my own hands, and she walked with that strange, half-dragging, half-triumphant gait, as if the universe had to bow down because she existed. I stood there for a good few minutes, looking at what was left of my seat. One leg was bent, the other was completely loose. The backrest looked like it had been chewed by an angry bear. It was like seeing a loved one lying on the floor, with no chance of help. After taking 3 deep breaths, I went into the house and tried to distract myself. I turned on the television, but everything seemed annoying. Even the local news was making me sick. The presenter was smiling, talking about the town's pie festival, and I was standing there with my soul in tatters. I tried to meditate. I lasted 30 seconds. All I could think of was the image of her sitting on my bench, as if she were a Greek goddess descending from the heavens to teach me a lesson about, I don't know, structural resistance? Then came the part that took me most seriously. The next day, she came back. That's right, she came back. She clapped her hands on my gate, all excited, carrying a flyer. It was an advertisement for a furniture store that was having a sale. She said she'd seen a sturdy chair and remembered me. She laughed, as if that was funny, as if the public humiliation of my stool turning to dust had become an inside joke between the two of us. I couldn't even reply. I took the flyer, closed the gate before my hand decided to act on its own. But it didn't stop there. because she's the kind of person who, when she thinks she's got a great idea, needs to share it with the whole world. She started telling the neighbors that my bench was dangerous, that she almost got hurt, that I should be more responsible with outdoor furniture. And of course, like any good professional gossip, she began to embellish the story. One time she said she fell and hit her head. A blatant lie. Another time, she said she twisted her ankle and had to get a compress. I doubt it. She could barely bend down. She even went so far as to say that she thought about suing me, but decided to rise above it. Do you believe that? Sue me for a bench in my yard that she sat on without being asked, that she broke with all the force of her ego and another 500 pounds of audacity. And what I heard afterwards was even more surreal. The woman had organized a community safety meeting. That's right, with coffee, crackers, and a circle of chairs on her front lawn. And the topic of the meeting? Dangerous equipment in the neighborhood. I was mentioned by name, as if I were a dealer in unstable benches. They said it was not about weight, of course it was, but about accident prevention. And there were neighbors agreeing, shaking their heads, agreeing, as if she had narrowly escaped being impaled by a medieval stake. By then, I had given up trying to keep the peace. I started to notice everything she did. And, look, you can't ignore a figure like that for long. The kind of person who goes out in her bathrobe at 3 in the afternoon to collect the mail and stops at every neighbor's gate to give her opinion on the height of the grass, the smell of washing powder, or the fact that stray cats are invading the neighborhood due to a lack of discipline. I began to realize that she had a pattern. She wasn't content with breaking the bank and getting away with it. She needed to set herself up as a victim, always. It was as if she lived in an eternal courtroom episode where everyone was guilty of something against her. And of course, she was the judge, the jury, and the prosecutor. The following week, I found a note in my mailbox from her. It was handwritten in that round, forced handwriting of an elementary school teacher trying to look nice. In the note, she said she hoped I had reflected on the situation and would consider installing more resistant street furniture because collective well-being came before personal tastes for rustic art. I closed the paper slowly, with all the calm that a human being can have before collapsing, because that's what it does. It sucks the patience out of you in installments. It doesn't arrive and explode. It undermines. It takes away your peace with little notes, meetings, gossip, and hints. The next thing you know, you're losing sleep over a bank that's turned into firewood and a woman who looks like she's stepped straight out of a badly written afternoon soap opera. But if she thought she was going to come out on top, poor thing, little did she know that I was just beginning to prepare my response. Because, darling, if there's one thing I've learned living here, it's that you should never underestimate a quiet neighbor with free time and internet access. I know there are people who preach peace, who talk about taking deep breaths, counting to 10, meditating, putting a crystal on your forehead, and letting the universe sort it out. But there are times when even the universe can't take it and gives you a wink like, go and tell me off, because this one has crossed the line. And that's exactly what I did. Because after being the butt of jokes at a community meeting, being accused of almost murdering a citizen with my bank, and even receiving a note with a moral lesson, I decided it was time to respond accordingly. I started with the basics. I went to the town hall and asked for the official plot plan. Not just mine, but hers too. There I discovered that half of the decorative plants she loved to display on the sidewalk were invading the public space. Literally. Her garden was a good 2 meters outside the property line. I stood there looking at those papers like someone finding a treasure map. Now you're going to know the real administrative terror, my dear, I thought. Not content with being the epicenter of the neighborhood drama, she still had a little garage project that, guess what? It didn't have any permission. It had been built illegally for years, and no one ever said anything because, apparently, she knew how to annoy people so much that people preferred to pretend they didn't see it. But I did, and I recorded everything. I took photos, filmed it, gathered paperwork, printed it out, and put together a dossier that would make any true crime series envious. Meanwhile, she carried on with her soap opera. One day, she saw me sweeping the sidewalk and shouted across the street, "Watch your bank, eh?" and laughed like an ambulance siren. She laughed alone, as always. Another time, she left a leaflet from an industrial-strength furniture store in my letterbox, with a post-it note that read, "Here's a tip," and a giggle emoji. That, my people, was enough for me to almost call NASA for help, to contain my impulse to knock on her door with a gallon of gasoline and a match. But instead of losing my head, I decided to be strategic. I sent a copy of the dossier to the Residents Association. Nothing too aggressive, just a subtle suggestion that maybe it was time to do a general inspection of the houses, to make sure everything was up to standard. After all, safety is for everyone, isn't it? 2 days later, she was on the sidewalk yelling at someone on the phone, probably her husband, who no one has ever seen, only heard grunting from time to time from the back of the house. She was gesticulating so much that it looked like she was going to take off. I saw her pointing to the garden, then to the garage, then to the sky, as if God were to blame for the anonymous complaint that arrived at the association's headquarters with all the details described to the millimeter. Of course, she suspected me, and, like anyone who doesn't know how to lose, she tried to turn the tables. She started spreading the word that I was a spiteful, unbalanced, even dangerous man. He told his next-door neighbor that he'd caught me talking to a plant by myself. I talked to my fern, yes, so what? And that this was a sign of an emotional disorder. Then she started trying to convince the other residents that I was a threat. She tried to isolate me, put pressure on me, turn the neighborhood against me as if this were a reality show and she was in the final asking for votes. But the spell turned. Because not everyone on the street is as influential as she thinks. Little by little, they came looking for me. People who had had enough of her. People who were keeping stories under wraps, waiting for the right moment to explode. One lady told me that the woman tried to stop her granddaughter from selling lemonade at the gate because the stall clashed with the visual harmony of the street. One guy said she threatened to call animal control because his dog barked too loudly during her soap opera. Yes, soap opera. She watches it at a very high volume and still yells at the TV as if she were there. Over time, I became a sort of neighborhood confidant. Not because I wanted to, but because everyone needed a friendly ear to tell them about the atrocities of this entity that floats around the neighborhood, thinking that everything is hers. One day, one of her children, a teenager who looked like he couldn't stand living under the same roof, came to me to ask for help finishing a school assignment. He said his mother wouldn't let him use the internet for academic nonsense because she was busy researching municipal urban control laws. And then I realized that she wasn't just a stone in my shoe. She was a stress epidemic that was spreading to the whole street. And I had unwittingly become the antibody of the situation, the agent of sanity. The irony of life is that sometimes you don't have to lift a finger to see someone fall. All it takes is a little push here, a word there, and the person's own ego does the whole job. After my anonymous complaint, the neighborhood became the scene of a separate soap opera. The town hall began to show up with suspicious frequency. First it was an urban zoning inspector, then an engineer with a notebook and a face of few friends, and finally, what seemed to be a lost intern with a clipboard who hardly knew where to look, but wrote everything down as if he were solving the national budget. The woman? Worse than a cockroach in a lighted kitchen. She was running around, trying to put things right that had been in a semi-clandestine state for years. She hired a bricklayer in a hurry, started pulling up the plants in the garden as if she'd been caught burying someone else's body. The garage was sealed off with a city hall banner. And when I say sealed, I mean it, literally. They put up a yellow and black banner that looked like a crime scene, and I swear that for a second I thought I'd take a photo, print it on a board, and put it up in the living room. But the funniest thing was that, even in the face of the impending catastrophe, she tried to keep her pose. She continued to walk around the neighborhood with her know-it-all face, as if the no-go lane was part of her early Halloween decoration. And anyone who asked, she said it was revitalization work. Revitalization, only if it was the patience of the neighbors, who were now watching from the sidelines, eating invisible popcorn on their balconies. And when she saw that her image as a community leader was going down the drain, she tried to regain her throne with a reconciliation party. That's right, she sent out a handwritten invitation. Not that it was to everyone, because I myself received mine thrown under the gate, like a threat disguised as sympathy. In the invitation, she spoke of rebuilding bridges and promoting unity, as if she hadn't spent the last few months being the human equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane. On the big day of the party, it rained. Not only did it rain, but the world fell, the sky collapsed, and the makeshift tarpaulin she had put up in the closed garage flew away with the wind, taking with it some little flags and half the snacks she had tried to serve on broken plastic plates. Those who showed up stayed for about 10 minutes and left. There was even a neighbor who went to see if it was true, walked around with his umbrella, and came home laughing. And then, like any good soap opera villain when she realizes she's lost control, she tried her last desperate act, spreading the word that she was being stalked. She put me on a mental list of invisible aggressors and started saying that I was following her, which was funny, considering that I barely left the house and had a camera in every corner, even pointed at my entrance, with the recording saved in the cloud. I asked a techie friend to sort out some images that showed her passing in front of my house 3 times a day, staring at my window as if she was about to cast a curse. I took these images to the neighborhood association, since she was so keen to do everything within the rules. And that's when the tables were turned, because then, my friends, an internal case was opened against her for hostile behavior, spreading rumors and violating the rules of coexistence. It wasn't just me. There was a neighbor who sent a screenshot of a message. A man who said that she accused his grandson of bird trafficking because he sold recycled bird seed, and even a couple who revealed that she demanded that they paint the door of their house a different color because their blue aroused anxiety. In the end, the association, yes, the one she controlled so much, voted to remove her as community representative. She tried to contest it, made speeches, cried, shouted, clapped her hands ironically, played indirect, and, finally, walked out slamming the door as if she had been betrayed by her own family. And look, the whole street heard. There were even people who recorded the moment. They say it became a sticker in a WhatsApp group of residents. In the following days, calm reigned. Her garden became scrubland. The gate was closed for weeks, and the plants that once invaded the sidewalk were now just a shadow of their former selves. The garage? It's still sealed. And she, well, disappeared for a while. They said she traveled to reconnect with her spirituality. I bet she went looking for a new neighborhood to torment. And me? Well, I bought another stool. Not handmade, I confess, but firm. Very firm. The kind that can bear the weight of the world, except hers. Now tell me, if it were up to you, what would you do after seeing your neighbor turn your stool into firewood and play the victim to the whole neighborhood? Would you swallow it or give it back? I want to see in the comments, because look, to this day, I wonder if I was too patient.